Hello everyone, this is Aashima Gupta from Apogee. A warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today for the Connecting the Dots webcast with Aneesh. A few housekeeping items before we get started. The slides that we will be covering today will be made available at our SlideShare channel. The recording of today's session will also be available at our YouTube channel where we have tons of other Apogee's content as well. We do want your questions. Please submit them in the Q&A pane and we can take them at the end. So with that, let's dive right in. A brief introduction about me before I turn over to Aneesh. My name is Aashima Gupta. I lead the strategy group at Apogee for healthcare vertical. Prior to coming here, over the past 6 years, I led the digital health incubations for Kaiser Permanente, leading the charge on the very first API implementation and launching multitude of digital capabilities utilizing public and private APIs, including the remote monitoring for chronic conditions. Now it's my privilege and a pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today, Aneesh Chopra, who served as the first CTO of the Obama administration. He's also an executive advisor to Apogee. And most importantly, Aneesh is a huge advocate for open APIs in the health arena and advancing the health agenda for our nation. Welcome, Aneesh.
Thank you very much for having me, Aashima, and it's a real pleasure to join all of you today. We are keen to hear your feedback, but thought to cover the following in our agenda for the discussion. The first is to provide some context around the care delivery transformation journey, how our public policy implications and private sector initiatives changing what we ask of our information technology in the healthcare system. More specifically, we're going to cover how open APIs and specifically some of the work that's being done through an industry collaborative called Project Argonaut might play a role in this future. And then lastly, to provide for you some specific areas where Apogee can help accelerate your API journey as it relates to healthcare delivery transformation. So with that in mind, we thought we might get started with a little bit of context. I generally think about this as the most innovative period in American healthcare. We, over the next decade, will find breakthrough products and services that will help to make sure we deliver better care at more affordable prices and with far better results and patient satisfaction, what my former colleague Don Berwick refers to as the triple aim. And part of the reason why we're seeing such a shift is this rise in consumer expectations and empowerment. We see the beginnings of this with individuals now shopping, if you will, for health insurance, largely on with the expectations of the Affordable Care Act. But beyond just those shopping on healthcare.gov, the industry itself is shifting in how it aligns the incentive systems to ensure that we get the right outcomes for the dollars spent. And the emergence of new technologies are enabling radical new service delivery options that were not available before. Whatever you look at this is going to be a decade of change. And the interesting opportunity is how information technology and specifically open health data might play a role. I thought I'd begin this part of the conversation with the President's recent announcement referring to the era of precision medicine, the notion that data-driven treatments will be driving the care delivery system in the future. And perhaps most relevant in that discussion is the idea that information should begin to flow in areas that today have been siloed or hard to get. This President's announcement early in 2015 went further to say that in the coming months and years, as we proceed towards this vision of a data-driven or precision medicine network or system, that we want to ensure that consumers have access to their own health data, and increasingly to the growing array of applications and services that can safely and accurately analyze that data. And so the notion of an app ecosystem is now very much in line with the policy objectives that the country is moving towards. When I make reference to the notion that we're entering this period of significant innovation, I thought I might share a little bit more context as to the nature of that bullishness in my voice. We are seeing three very important trends come together at this moment in the American healthcare delivery system. The first is the opening up of more data. Now, partially, this is fueled by the opening up of government health data, which I'll share a bit more about momentarily. But it is equally the case that we are starting to see the opening up of data through more interoperable health IT systems that have been part of a program we've seen over the last several years accelerate the adoption and use of electronic health record systems, the Meaningful Use Program. But perhaps most important in this journey has been the dramatic commitment and aggressive time frame for shifting the way we pay for health care. Health Secretary Sylvia Burwell announced earlier this year that by 2018, it is the stated policy objective of the federal government to shift 50% of the payments that Medicare delivers to alternative payment models, whether they be accountable care organizations, bundled payments, or any combination therein, where we say goodbye to the fee-for-service, pay-for-quantity story that's been the way our delivery system has operated in the past, and move towards one where we are aligning the incentives to focus on the health of the individual, incentivizing earlier investments in prevention and care coordination to avoid downstream investments in treating those who've fallen ill, perhaps unnecessarily so had we not made those earlier investments in prevention. This journey has had a number of early successes. In the first term of the Obama administration, it was our stated objective to shift the default setting from closed to open. Data sets that had been previously held and managed internally by the federal government were increasingly made available to the public, but not just in traditional PDF report format. Now we're seeing the default setting to open include the ability to access healthcare data in machine-readable format, increasingly by APIs. One small example early in this journey, the administration's long had a database of federally qualified health centers. And that database would be a good map of some of the low-cost providers in virtually every corner in the country. But to access this database, you'd have to find a very custom search engine, hard to access, hard to use. Very few people visited the websites within the hhs.gov domain that would allow you to see where those individual practices are located. But by shifting the default to open and inviting app developers, public, private, nonprofit, academic, to come in and participate without any additional burden or intellectual property constraint, we saw the rise of an entrepreneur with the story of a group of emergency room doctors in Colorado who thought, could they in fact build an iPhone app that would invite their users to figure out when it's appropriate or not appropriate to seek care in the emergency room. This eventual application called iTriage would ultimately generate 6+ million downloads over the course of the first few years of its life. But one of the features they thought to add was, if you say to the individual user that I don't need to go to the emergency room, where else should I go? In the app itself, they incorporated the list of the federally qualified health centers, and thanks to GPS technology, could prioritize the nearest ones for where the patient's located. This modest incorporation of an open data set, without much muss or fuss or marketing investment, generated in its first year over 100,000 referrals to federally qualified health centers. And that was just scratching the surface. Similarly, in the journey towards interoperable health information technology, or more broadly speaking, the electronic health record systems, we've seen over the last 5 years a minority shifting to a majority of primary care physicians and the overwhelming majority of hospitals now fully on board with the digital health revolution. And momentarily we'll describe some of the trends in that area to move that data set towards open APIs as well. So where are we heading? On Friday of last week, the Department of Health and Human Services released its proposed meaningful use rules. These are the operating procedures, not just for the next stage of meaningful use, but as my friends refer to this rule as the infinity rule. That is to say, it will be the last and final statement as to what we expect of doctors and hospitals going forward for having delivered some $30+ billion in resources. And this meaningful use rule has really shifted the debate beyond just digitizing the information that had been previously held in manila folders, but to make good on the President's comments from January that patients would have the opportunity to access their own data in machine-readable form, and more importantly, to be able to direct that data to the applications they trust and support to help live healthier lives. This specific meaningful use rule offers 3 areas that I'd like to highlight that are relevant for the discussion we're currently having. The first is a new rule that would ensure patients have access, machine-readable access, to their own health data within 24 hours of that information being made available inside the health system. Now, today, patients are expected to access this information via portals. And that particular regulation speaks of methods of access. Patients can view their data. Patients should be able to download their data. And they should be able to transmit their data safely and securely. What this rule offers is the potential to introduce another layer on top of the traditional portal features. And I refer to this as the wholesale API layer. This suggests that the actual portal the patients might interact with may not actually be the health system's website or the physician's website. It might be a third-party application, maybe sponsored by the health system or maybe not, maybe one more of the choosing of the patient's interests. And that this wholesale API requirement would mean that individuals can direct that destination portal or mobile app to then access and present back and compute against their own health data. It's important to note that the expectation in this rule is that wholesale access be made available to the patient at no additional cost. As you note today, when doctors and hospitals exchange records without the consumer's direct involvement, there often are fees, transaction fees, to support the health information exchange infrastructure. This expectation is that those fees are waived to the individual or to the app that they trust. But perhaps most exciting in how the meaningful use proposed rules impact information technology is the notion that the Health and Human Services Department is thinking about getting out of the portal regulations business in the first place. While today we are requiring health systems and doctors to get at least 5% of their patients to log into their portals and access and use their health data, HHS has boldly suggested if you can provide API access to the patient, then in theory, you could avoid having to be under additional regulation for specific usage requirements on the patient portal. This, we believe, will tilt the priorities within healthcare delivery organizations away from micromanaging the features on a portal towards facilitating safe, secure access to trusted and approved parties, whether it be the patient or their designated apps. And that's the big opportunity for APIs. So what is the healthcare API that the department seems to be looking for or to be acknowledging? Well, there's a promising path that has emerged that's been entirely financed by the private sector, and it's referred to as Project Argonaut. You see, in 2010, when I had the honor and privilege of serving in the White House, the President's Council of Advisors of Science and Technology, which include Eric Schmidt from Google, Craig Mundy at Microsoft, and a number of other leading thinkers throughout the healthcare and scientific communities, were asked by the President whether or not the electronic health records ecosystem is sufficient to deliver on the promise he made in the Affordable Care Act for delivering a better, safer, healthier delivery system. And the answer came back a resounding not yet. In 2010, the President's Council of Advisors of Science and Technology made some pretty bold recommendations, including the importance of moving from what had traditionally been the method of exchanging health information, which was document-centric, to a data-centric architecture. And more importantly, a data-centric architecture that could facilitate a whole new category of products and services powered by access to that underlying data infrastructure. Now, that vision has taken many years to move forward, but repeatedly, advisors and experts weighing in on the healthcare IT landscape have consistently said this shift from documents to data is critical. And most recently, a team of experts that mostly support the Defense Department called the JASONs came out with a full endorsement of that data-centric architecture and explicitly said that the healthcare delivery system needs open APIs. In response to the JASON report, a stunning collaboration of vendors and stakeholders appeared, ready to take the baton from the JASONs. The Argonaut project, named perhaps goofishly in response to the JASON report, speaks to the opportunity that's in front of us to deliver open reference documents, implementation code, and implementation guides to help understand what it is that an organization has to do to meet this dream of a data-centric healthcare IT ecosystem. There are two critical components in this regard. Number one, defining the payload. HL7, the standards body that has been hard at work modernizing and improving health records data sets, has been working for the last several years on an emerging standard called FHIR, Fast Health Interoperability Resources. And while there are nearly 100 FHIR profiles up and running in various forms of readiness, from very early to more mature, the Argonaut project has identified 16 of those FHIR profiles that directly line up with the existing meaningful use requirements, what's referred to as the meaningful use common data set. It is the patient summary file, a description of the patient's basic demographics, their vital signs, their lab results, the procedures that they've had, their medications list, and the like. These 16 profiles are now going through a review and an update to be road ready and mature for balloting on the next HL7 DSTU, scheduled for later this spring. Those 16 profiles will meet all the primary requirements, even in the proposed 3 meaningful use rule. But in addition to the payload, we needed to introduce a security architecture, a security framework that would ensure the right patient or their designated third party has access to the information that will be expressed as FHIR profiles. And to do that, the good people in the Argonaut project have turned to the OAuth profile. So over the next month and a half, Project Argonaut will have completed a review of an OAuth profile sufficiently vetted for the healthcare context and these 16 FHIR profiles to ship a particular payload, and will make available in this code and document sprint information in an open fashion that any healthcare organization can adopt on their own with third parties, but to be freely available and widely adopted. Already, over 50 organizations have publicly pledged to implement the Argonaut specifications. The train is quickly leaving the station. What does this mean for the healthcare IT landscape? Well, I'll end my early part of these remarks speaking about the growing healthcare app ecosystem and the notion that organizations are now prepared to cultivate, curate, and support their own app stores, their own portfolio of connected apps. If you are a health system and you are able to expose your patient's healthcare via FHIR and OAuth protocols aligned to Argonaut, well, in theory, you can onboard apps that have already pledged to connect and implement towards those same specifications, and can ensure that those apps can deliver functionality in near real time. The notion that you can one-click download and connect, plug and play App 1 or App 2 or App 3 on top of this infrastructure to deliver value is the promise of this API framework. And the goal is to enable what I refer to as front door interoperability. The notion that the patient that you care for, who might also have medical records at a competing hospital or a neighboring physician's office, or with the lab company nationally, that those data sets that the patient now has the right to access can connect back to the health system looking to build out that complete patient profile, the information that it needs to better serve those patients as we move towards value-based care. And the decisions as to which apps to participate and which services to employ will ultimately fall on the shoulders of the healthcare delivery systems and not necessarily be constrained by any particular vendor or approach. An open API, an open app ecosystem, fostering a growing ecosystem of applications and services, all pointing towards ways in which we can make sure that patients get the right care at the right time and in the right setting. So I'll end my early remarks by saying this is the most exciting time I've ever seen in the healthcare delivery system. That the right combination of incentives and technologies and open data are coming together to create this particular window of opportunity. And I'm excited that organizations like Apigee are playing an important role in fostering and accelerating this journey. With that, I'll turn to Aashima to share a few more words about the Apogee perspective on this movement before we turn it to your questions.
Thank you so much, Aneesh. What an incredible moment for healthcare with the open API and open health data. That's just tremendous. So let me shift gears and share Apogee's approach on building a foundation for the data-centric and digitally connected enterprise that Aneesh talked about, and how that will be applicable in the healthcare setting. So when we look into the future of healthcare, as Aneesh was talking about, there's a strong belief that understanding the needs of the consumers, their behavior, their lifestyle, their context is going to be super important, and then connecting the dots for the consumer, predicting and coordinating the most effective intervention at the right time will lead to the better outcome. I know there are a bunch of words here. Let me give you my own example. So in this picture, if to put that in a perspective from a consumer standpoint, if I put myself in the middle on the gray box, by the way, I have asthma, which flares up in certain conditions based on the pollen count during some specific months in a year. And oftentimes I forget to take my medication. So in this case, the medical records, which are on the top left, they have my diagnosis that I am asthmatic. My medication history is with my pharmacy, and the publicly available data set about the pollen count is readily available today. So wouldn't it be powerful that to give me a proactive reminder that Aashima, you, based on my zip code, you know my demographics, you know the pollen count that exists, and if I'm out and about, my geolocation is known by my cell phone. So connecting the dots and being proactive to me, okay, Aashima, take your medication because pollen count is high or your asthma will get triggered. So now to me, that's a personalized and very empowering consumer experience. And now, mind you, that takes the data that is available in my health system, but we're also combining that with externally available public data, correlating it and connecting it together. That's where we see the health going. So how do you make this asthma use case happen? What does the architecture look like? In this slide, what we see here, if you see at the bottom side, that's where a typical health IT landscape looks like. We have data repository, data mass, databases, a number of them. The second box in the bottom slide represents the legacy systems or the system of records, which could be your EMRs, your pharmacy, labs, claims. That data is existing in that box there. Then moving on to the third box is the ecosystem partners that we are exchanging information with. And currently it could be PDF, it could be document based. And then finally the fourth box represents the analytic capabilities that health IT systems use to run their business. All this exists today and is pretty complicated. The data is pretty much siloed and it's not frictionless to exchange information between that. Now at the top layer on top of it, I talked about the context of a consumer. So now with the advent of new mobile apps, new sensors, new trackers, all this information about patient-generated data, patient-reported outcomes is hitting healthcare IT. And all these innovations, while they are magical in what capabilities they do bring, they are fighting for their share to exist in this health IT landscape, which is already complicated to begin with. So how do you make sense of the data that the health IT already has and the new influx of data that's going to come in? And that's where we need the digital foundation right to be able to make that connectivity seamless, ubiquitous, and frictionless. That's where we believe a platform like that will help. So shifting gears, so we talked about the architecture at a very high level, and I'll share the detailed architecture in a bit also. But I also wanted to mention another point. In this economy of digitally data-centric enterprise, these developers are the key in this app economy. And what they are looking for ease of use of consumption of these data sets via APIs. They are the key influencers, and they want testable sandbox, they want environments, better documentation, developer portals, so that they can build those immersive experiences for consumers like me where I can better manage my health condition. They're looking for these tools for them to build on top of that platform. So both the platform and the developers are going to be key here. So putting in perspective from a case study, Pearson is a leading learning company. And few years ago, they decided that being on a print-only business is going to be a losing proposition for them. So what they did is they took the content that they have built over the years and they opened it up via APIs in a digitally consumable fashion. And when that happened, the magic happened. Meaning, within 2 years, they were able to move from a traditional print publishing shop to an e-learning digital platform, and they opened it up for innovation for their internal teams within their enterprise. And so they also opened it up for external developers to innovate on. A result is just phenomenal. Within the 2 years, they were able to build 2,000 plus applications that were built on their platform. The revenue from their digital content was $2 billion in just 2012 alone. So in that case, using the power of the platform, combining that for the ease of developers, they opened this new revenue channel here. Aneesh, I know education is very similar to healthcare in terms of it being more traditional. Could you help me draw some parallel in how can this model be used in the healthcare setting?
Thank you, Aashima. And it's critical to understand that industries that have historically had a difficult time opening up data, that is to say, there were additional regulatory burdens constraining the ability to share information in healthcare, in education, even in the energy sector, that organizations that are born of and operating in these more traditional sectors are starting to see the value of opening up data. And while this initial case study doesn't touch student records, for example, the parallel of industries that had been regulated and constrained shifting to a new digital environment gives hope that the same pace of new digital services and value add on account of opening up and constraining and using services to manage those developers is actually quite positive. So my hope is, as organizations from Pearson to Walgreens to a growing number of energy companies start to open up more of the data in the same form or fashion, as we envision happening in the digital health systems for patients, for providers, we're going to see a very similar uptake in innovation.
Yeah, I agree, Aneesh. And you're spot on. Healthcare is a heavily regulated industry. And as we're looking into the new approaches of connecting the data, data liquidity, and enabling data access, this access also brings up the challenges of authentication, identity management across systems and entities, which frankly adds to the risks and it adds to the timeline for deployment. And that's where I would want to spend some time on this slide, is where Apogee comes in. As a company, we have a rich history of managing this identity management, security, auditability at scale through our API management platform. We have intense experience in building some of the exchanges in telco arena, where we are sharing the data across different entities, across organization boundaries. And we are bringing that capability of a hardened platform, which is purpose-built, which has all these capabilities of identity management, access management, auditability out of the box to the healthcare setting. We believe that the work that is being done by Project Argonaut, now combining that with our API management framework, that combination is the perfect marriage, and frankly, it could be the innovation fuel for taking FHIR on FHIR, meaning bringing that innovation and accelerating that. So let me cover the slide. How does that work? So in the bottom here, I know it's a little difficult to see, there are source systems. As I mentioned, they could be the EMR, the pharmacies, the labs, or any system of records where the data about the consumer reside. And now we are exposing them by the guidelines as mandated by the FHIR work under Project Argonaut. And now we're combining that with the Apogee's API management platform. We are exposing those assets in a thoughtful way with building security, access, authorization as we're designing it first. That's an API first approach. And once those assets are now exposed by API, are managed through our platform, you can then release it to your private consumption, which is at the top. If you see the top right, it's where your enterprise developers can build the websites, the internal apps, any digital properties that the enterprise has. Then we can move it to, we keep going left, we can share the same APIs with our partners in a B2B setting, which is a payer, provider, pharma, we can do that exchange easily because we are, again, running on a purpose-built platform that has been doing that for a number of years. And so on and so forth. We can also monetize this APIs for opening up new revenue channels. And also we can participate in the public API exchanges as part of the same platform there. Again, this is a HIPAA compliant solution, both available in on-prem and as well as in the cloud environment. So the basic offering, which is the DNA of this FHIR on Apogee, is the Edge platform that is a unified platform of API consumption, exposure, and the operational management that I just talked about, which includes the security, auditability, access management. That is at the heart of what we are offering. Which brings me to our early adopter program. This is a program that we are specifically kicking off for our forward-thinking partners. It's an invitation-only program where we are offering the FHIR APIs and combining that with our platform offering for a low-risk trial. So 3 benefits here. One is this will help you enable to get your organization into this data-centric, digitally connected enterprise journey, where you can build those consumer experiences using the data that is already logged up in the silo by liquidating it. The second benefit here is you'll get up to speed with FHIR protocol pretty quickly, lowering your implementation costs and risk because we are bringing a hardened platform which is already being used. By the way, from the scale perspective, 100 billion transactions flow through that platform today in a cloud offering. So the risk from the implementation is fairly low. The third benefit would be that you could be an early influencer as the standard is getting built and deployed and implemented. Those early learning can help not only your organization, but can help the broader healthcare ecosystem. Aneesh, anything you would like to add on the early adopter program from your side?
No, I think one of the important messages, and this is a great segue as we turn to questions, and there are already a few on the chat room, which I'd love to get into. The other key factor is where you just ended, and that is a key principle, how standards evolve in the context of regulation, is the need for feedback loops. So we don't lock in the wrong standards that don't actually deliver the functionality that are promised. And so a key feature of Argonaut is to cultivate early adopters, not just because you want them to see early value and benefit, but rather they can contribute back for the feedback loops the information about what's working and what's not working. And so when we reference the 50 or so organizations that are committed, it's mostly around those who are keen to give that early feedback, and maybe those who want to be pioneers within their community, but also those who see that feedback loop as critical. Aashima, we have a few questions that are showing up on the Q&A stream. Why don't we do that?
Sure. So before we just one thing, we can sign up for early adopter program. You can reach out to us. We will also be doing an initiator discovery call for the early adopter program enrollment there.
Yeah, our first question is from Brian, relates to the notion of OAuth. And to be specific, Argonaut is starting its review on OAuth 2.0 and OpenID Connect. You can learn more at smartplatforms.org. And that process is under review to ensure that the security profiles are really sufficient to meet the higher bar that we have in the healthcare industry. And I think there's a few other questions that Alan raised about HIPAA and HIPAA protections. And it's important to note that actually HIPAA is both a protector of health information, but also a requirement to give data back to the consumer. And so organizations who have historically prevented their patients from having access to their own data are now finding enforcement actions against them by the Department of Health and Human Services. In fact, a famous settlement took place in 2012, where a health plan refused to provide electronic access to patient data, and HHS ultimately fined the organization $20,000 a day for every day they withheld the patient's access to their own data.
Wow.
So we're seeing HIPAA really enabling data liquidity back to the patient, while also constraining and protecting who else gets to see that data within and across enterprises. So HIPAA has a constraining and an enabling function.
So one question I see is, Aneesh, what are the biggest landmine companies that are moving towards an API-first architecture should look out for?
Well, like most, this journey is often about what problem are you trying to solve before you focus on the technology. And it is important for organizations to have that perspective. That is to say, if they're shifting from a fee-for-service healthcare system to a value-based health system, the kinds of questions an organization would have asked of their IT department in the past are different than the kinds of questions that they're asking of their IT department in a value-based world. So my humble suggestion would be one of the pitfalls to avoid is to basically not have the end game in mind, the questions that the leadership wants to have answered. That to me is the biggest challenge. So that's where I would put my emphasis, is to make sure that as the organization shifts to value-based care delivery and is looking to answer questions that often require data sets that may or may not be entirely within the shop, that perhaps this open API strategy can help both enable multiple data sets to come together and answer those questions, or can help bring in information that can be useful that otherwise wouldn't be available.
Yeah, thank you, Aneesh. I think one important other aspect is consumer consent. So when we are looking into sharing that information on patients' or consumers' behalf, managing that consent is going to be very, very important as well, as we need their consent to be able to share their data with the app ecosystem or with the other healthcare stakeholders.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. We got a couple questions on the reminder of the website. Smartplatforms.org is the foundational data spec for anyone to reference for Argonaut, although, and we'll pass around the web address for Project Argonaut, but on the hl7.org site, you can find the most up-to-date documentation for Project Argonaut.
Thank you, Aneesh. There's one more question is, do you have any health plans signed up to provide data? We are working with a number of leading health plans for the FHIR early adopter program, and more to come out in a few weeks' time. But yes, we are working very closely with a few leading health plan providers.
For those who are curious about the notion of opening up more data to individuals, there has been an administration-led call to action called the Blue Button Connector. And a number of health plans, hospitals, and other stakeholders have publicly pledged to provide their customers machine-readable access to their own data. My presumption is organizations that have publicly pledged to provide Blue Button access are natural places to go who might be interested in following up with providing that access via APIs.
Are there tools available to convert historical medical records, not EHR, to the standard formats proposed by Argonaut project?
Yeah, that's a great question. And frankly, one of the reasons why I'm so excited that Apogee is pursuing the early adopter program, because that work is a heavy lift. It does require, man hours to convert the what you would call a CCDA, which is the current modern standard by which patient summary data flows, into the HL7 FHIR specification per Argonaut. And Aashima, you might say a word or two about how Apogee intends to support those connectors,
right,
and how it wishes to share them back with the community.
Yes, thank you, Aneesh. So absolutely, one of our offering in the FHIR API exchange is building out those FHIR connectors to the leading EMRs, to CCDA, to make that journey easier for the health systems. So what we are starting to build is these connectors which will map your backend, be it HL7, to the FHIR profiles, and we will then commit to make that available as open source. That we realize each implementation of EMR, EHR could be slightly different variations. Hence, we are making them open source for you to build on, or in some cases, it will be applicable as is. So we are committed to making those connectors, that heavy lifting that Aneesh talked about, getting that done and giving that source code available as part of the early adopter to the open source community to build on. The next question is, does Apple HealthKit APIs map to FHIR APIs?
So Apple HealthKit APIs today are very much in line with where the Argonaut specifications will go. They themselves are not yet implemented in production with FHIR. Very few organizations are in production on FHIR. But as an example, my good friend and compatriot in this Argonaut journey, Dr. John Palenka at Beth Israel Deaconess, successfully completed a use case where a Withings scale connected via Apple HealthKit was able to fuel an update to the patient portal and the electronic health record within the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. And so that is an example where this is going to happen very clearly.
Thank you, Aneesh. Another question is, do you have any slides to share we could utilize for an internal conversation? The answer is absolutely yes. Like with any webcasts that we do, we will upload these slides onto our SlideShare and Apogee channel. For any internal consumption, you can download the PDFs and share.
Aashima, thank you for inviting me to join today. The session has been highly productive. We'll stick on for another couple minutes if there are additional questions, but I want to thank all of you for joining, and most importantly, to thank you in advance for your commitment to participate in the open API movement. And if possible and with appropriate interest, we'd love to do that through the Apogee Early Adopter Program, but there are many paths on this open API journey, and we look forward to connecting. And we'll stick around for another couple minutes, right, Aashima?
Yes.
You're not in a hurry to leave, are you?
Yeah, no, we have. We'll stick around, but I wanted to thank you, Aneesh, for sharing your perspective. This has been an inspiring journey for me, and I'm hoping we will leave some more thought-provoking ideas for people to react to. This is too much to absorb, but what an incredible moment for healthcare. As we're waiting, another few things that I would like to mention is join us at HIMSS. We will be at the Connected Patient Gallery. We will be showcasing a live demo and a live proof point, which is taking the FHIR APIs and deploying them on our Apogee sandbox. And we'll be also showcasing few applications accessing that sandbox. Aneesh and I are also speaking at HIMSS. Where do we go from here in terms of the open health data? So if you are at HIMSS, our session is on Monday at 4:45 p.m. Do join us.
I see a question about whether Argonaut is going to plan on more profiles beyond the 16. I think it's a terrific question. Our intention in Argonaut was a time-limited code and document sprint to take us from December through the balloting at HL7 in May. And the premise is, long after that effort proceeds, there will be ongoing and traditional HL7 FHIR-related work on the ever-growing number of profiles, whether they be administrative profiles, financial profiles, and the like. Argonaut itself is tied very specifically to the meaningful use common data set, which is referenced in regulation. So to your answer, no, Argonaut is not doing more specifically, but that the movement to improve the quality of FHIR profiles absolutely will continue. And yes, Alan, there is a test server that is being made available via Project Argonaut. I don't have the URL handy, but it is most certainly available free and accessible with dummy patient data that is through the HL7 Argonaut project site. And we'd be delighted to have, make sure that we share that link with everyone after the call.
Yeah, thank you, Aneesh. One last question for you, I believe there. What are the 3 things that you're most excited about healthcare?
Yeah, so I think that's a great way to close the session. And I would say that probably the most important thing for me is anticipating the patient's journey such that if we can identify in advance that a patient may be seeking care, perhaps not in the ideal setting and perhaps not at the right time, the ability to predict that patient's journey and then anticipate or therefore inform options that might be better for that patient is sort of the holy grail in my humble opinion. And that capability invokes a number of technologies from predictive modeling to open APIs and improvements in security. So I see a combination of technologies enabling that very simple question. What is the next step in that patient's journey, and how might we help to inform or influence that step to make sure that that patient gets the best care at the right time and in the right setting? All right. Well, thank you very much for coming up on our end of hour.
Yes.
Aashima, this has been fun.
Yes, thank you, Aneesh. Thanks so much for the inspiring words and sharing the Project Argonaut journey. And thank you, folks, for joining us. As I mentioned before the call, this recording will be available at YouTube, and the slides will be shared across the SlideShare channel for Apogee. Thank you all, and have a good rest of the day.